and welcome back to the CR Wood Shop. This is Bert, your friendly neighborhood cabinet maker. In this video, I would like to show you how to glue up a half-blind dovetail drawer. I have prepared for us a 14 by 21 inch drawer with 9/16 thick stock. The groove to accept the plywood bottom has been cut on the dado blade. It is a 1/4 inch deep and approximately a 1/4 inch from the bottom edge of the drawer. Before we assemble a drawer, we need to gather all the tools and equipment that we will need for this process. We're going to need a bottle of glue with a nice fine point so that we can get the glue right into the tail sockets. We need a brush, a mallet or dead blow hammer, like this pink one in this case, a block of wood to help us pound the joints together so that we don't dent our stock. Before we proceed to glue this together, we need to sand the inside of the box, which I've done here. All the pieces have been sanded. The pencil marks, the mill marks have been removed. Once the drawer is glued together, it's very difficult to get inside the box and sand those areas. So it's much easier to do that beforehand. We need to prepare a plywood bottom. And this is probably the most critical aspect of creating a drawer. If this piece is not square or it's the wrong dimension, the drawer will not go together, it will not square up, and then it will not work in your cabinet. To determine the required dimension for the plywood bottom, we need to determine the two dimensions. We need width and length. The width of the panel will be determined by measuring the length of the front and back of the cabinet. In this case it's 14 inches, and then we will subtract twice the thickness of the stock, which is 9/16. So we would subtract twice the thickness, and then we would add back twice the depth of the groove. In this case, it is a 1/4 inch depth groove, so we will add back a 1/2 inch. This will give us, if we take 14 inches, we subtract twice the thickness, add back twice the groove, we're going to end up with about 13 and 5/16 inch. 13 1/4 to 13 and 5/16. It is very important that you make the panel a little bit narrower than your actual dimension. This will allow for depth error or length error, and when you cut your stock, if they're a little bit off and that plywood bottom is a little bit too wide, it will not go together. So I subtract at least 1/16 of an inch from the width to allow for glue or error in the process. So in this case I ended up with a 13 1/4 inch wide panel. Now to determine the length, we need to measure the side of the box from shoulder to shoulder. So right from the pin, that's the shoulder, the edge of the shoulder, to the other end, we have 20 1/4, and to that we will add twice the depth of the groove. So it's 20 1/4 plus a 1/2 inch, that's 20 3/4. That would be the actual absolute maximum length that would fit into this drawer. But I want to remove or shorten it by approximately a 1/16 of an inch minimum for glue allowance or error. So at 2 3/4, in this case I've actually removed about 1/8 of an inch, so we're around 20 5/8, and so that should work just fine. This is similar to a mortise and tenon. If you recall, a mortise should always be slightly deeper than the length of the tenon to allow for glue and any debris that might be left in the mortise. Same principle applies here to the drawer. So we have our bottom, we have our sides, and we're ready to proceed with the glue up. We're going to start with a tailboard, and I'm going to apply a little bit of glue into each socket. try to avoid getting glue on the end grain of your tailboard. That glue will soak into the end grain, stain it, and it's very difficult to clean that out. I'm going to put a very small amount of glue in the groove, essentially spot gluing it, just a couple dabs here and there to hold that bottom in place and to keep it from vibrating around once it's all assembled. I'm also going to put a little bit of glue on the pins and brush that in. I want to have a minimal amount of squeeze out. We're trying to reduce our work and clean up. This will be a fairly snug joint, so I'll need my mallet, dead blow hammer, drive it together, check the other side, wipe off any squeeze out. That looks like a pretty good fit, so that corner is nice. Clean up my bench here. Now I am going to glue the other end on. I'm making sure my labels are all lined up and putting it in the right place. We have to assemble one side last. This has to be the last piece because of the dovetail triangular shape that has to be tapped straight down into the drawer. If you accidentally put this piece on first, you will have to torque or tweak the drawer apart to get this end, the last end, in place, and that will damage the pins. You'll have a less attractive joint. So that one will be last. Now we will, again, check, put some glue in the sockets, tail sockets, spread it. The shop is a bit cold today. The heaters are off, and that does affect the glue. If your glue gets too cold or freezes, it will damage it. It will not work. This glue seems to be working fine. And I'm going to spot glue this, just a couple little dabs. Not much. Don't want any squeeze out. Now drive this end in place. Try to hold it square. It's okay to strike the end grain with a dead blow hammer. It will not damage that. Check that joint. A little bit more. We can flip it over, put a block of wood on this side, and drive it in. There we go. Now we can insert the bottom. If you have a nicer face, place that towards the inside of the drawer. I don't like to put too much glue in the sides or the end piece grooves at this point because it'll squeeze out all over and push down into the bottom of the groove and cause a mess. Tap that in. Looks like it's in pretty well. A good trick at this point, a good little tip. If the bottom doesn't fit, I could remove it at this point, go to the table saw, trim it down, and make it fit without compromising these two joints. It's okay, they're glued, they're fairly square, it won't compromise it. If the length is okay but you're not sure of the width, a good tip is to take the remaining side, place one end of the groove onto the plywood, and slide it up to the end. Now it's at an angle, but I can tell that this end is slightly lower than the end of the front piece. And that's good. That means that'll leave a little bit of gap. If this sits proud or slightly above, then we know that this will not go, the joint will not seat tightly, and we will not have the proper dimension box. So this looks okay. can test this end, and that one looks okay. I do this even if I know the bottom is correct, just to check to make sure that that is all the way down into the groove. If there's something blocking that plywood bottom, it's not allowing it to fit into the groove, then I might pull it out, wiggle it around, clean out that groove, and this will show me that problem. Now I will go ahead and put some glue in the sockets, both ends, just a minimal amount of glue. The dovetail is a mechanical interlocking joint. The triangular dovetail shape adds considerable strength to this joint, so the adhesive just helps hold everything together, and the dovetail shape resists the drawer being pulled apart when the customer, the person using the drawer, pulls on the front, pull the handle on the pull. They're working against that shape, that triangular shape, which helps keep the drawer together. Cleaning out my brush into the groove here, and we're ready to place the last piece. Get your dovetails lined up, start tapping it in, but don't hit too hard at this point, just in case the plywood is not lining up with the groove. Keep an eye on it, check it, make sure that everything's going together, and use your block of wood. That helps. The block of wood will help drive all the pins together at the same time. Sometimes if you hit really hard, you can split the piece. If you're forcing one pin in sooner than the other. Got to hit it fairly hard. This drawer is willow. The sides are willow and the front and back are maple, which is, the maple is much harder than the willow, and the willow can tend to split very easily. And watch out for your fingers. That looks pretty good. Alright, with dovetails you don't have to clamp them. They're strong enough to hold together, and if the box is square, you won't need any clamps. If you can pound them in nice and flush, a little bit of fuzz, a little bit of gap here and there, that's okay, that will sand off. It's very important that you check your drawer for squareness before you consider it finished. To do that, we use a tape measure and we measure diagonally. Center your tape measure on one corner, go to the opposite corner and check your numbers. 25 and 7/16. Go to the other corner. We are 25 and 9/16. So we are off by about 1/8 of an inch. And that means that this corner is long. There's a good trick to adjusting a drawer. It's long in this dimension. So I'm going to put it on the bench, and don't panic, this won't destroy the drawer. You might have to use a significant amount of force, but I'm going to push straight down in that corner until I feel it give a little bit, and then I will measure it again. It should be about 25 and a half. It's a little long, it's a little short there, so it's a little bit long this way. I went too far. Oh, that might be too far the other way. It's very easy to go. That's pretty close. 25 and a half and 25 and a half, and there we go. It's square, still flush. It should be the proper dimension. 14 inches by 21 and a half. And that's exactly, 21 3/8. The drawer, good thing to remember, your drawer will become a little bit longer than the length of the stock that you cut for the sides. If you look at your half plane dovetail, the pins, from the length of the pins to the end of the box there's a little bit of material. In this case, it's about 3/16 of an inch. So when you have a dovetail at each end, you're gaining 3/16 here and 3/16 there for an overall increase in the length of the box of 3/8 of an inch. We've accounted for that when we measured our cabinet. We gave ourselves an inch space from the back of the drawer to the back inside face of the cabinet, and with this increase of 3/8 of an inch, we'll have about a 5/8 inch gap back there. And this drawer is done. We will let it dry, and then we will sand it, clean it all up. I'll get the pencil marks off. I will ease the edges, put some putty in the dovetails or any little gaps that are around, and sand it up nice and clean, and then spray a finish on it. If you have any questions, send me a message or email me.